Hey everybody, thank you for joining me today. So for today's technique video, I'm going to be using the embossing folder from the March kit for Scrapbooking with Me boutique. And this one is by Seagull and it's called the Leaf Floral Swirl. Okay, and when I was thinking about using this, I immediately thought of using inks and stuff like that. So the first one I'm going to show on camera is actually using Versamark ink and the embossing folder. So here's my Versamark, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat my paper with my anti-static powder tool, and we're using just black cardstock from my stash. And after I treat this, I'm just going to take the Versamark ink pad and actually run it down on the side that's going to, um, I guess it's going to, what would it be? Like the push down. It creates that indent because on that side of the paper, the pattern itself is going to actually be raised, and then the embossing ink is going to be on the parts that are lower, which will be everything that's not the swirls. Okay, so once I get everything treated, I'm just grabbing some uh, regular printing paper just to have a scratch, and I'm just taking my Versamark ink pad and I'm dragging it along the embossing folder. Now, what I would suggest is on some of the more open areas, you might want to actually press down, up and down, just so that way you make sure all your areas get fully covered in ink, because you'll see when I do the gold embossing that there are parts of it that aren't really full, and I don't like to run it through twice, because it can break down your paper if you run it through too many times. So I'm just grabbing the Cuttlebug, I'm putting it through with the A and two B plates, and we're just going to run it through, and as I get to the end, I'm going to stop and then reverse it and bring it back. I'm just trying to make sure that all the ink that we have on there is being transferred to our piece of paper. All right, so once we take it out, I'm just going to grab my coffee filter, and I'm also grabbing the Ranger Superfine Detail Gold Embossing Powder. So whichever embossing powder, you guys have in your stash. Um, I think right now all they have on the boutique is the uh, emboss it, the stick it from Ranger, but I want to say it's out of stock. So when I link down below, I'll make sure to see what other embossing powders we may have, and I'll try and link those here for you guys. Because really, I love all embossing powders. I think they add something to any project. So all we're gonna do is pour the embossing powder over our panel, and it should be sticking everywhere except for the parts that are raised. And if you find a spot that actually does have um, embossing powder sticking to it, just grab your dry brush and you can get that taken off. I'm going to reach over and grab one right now and get that off. And then we're just going to keep putting the embossing powder on the project. And then once we get that taken care of, then I'm going to heat it with our heating tool. And you just want to make sure that with your heating tool that you allow it to warm up for a few seconds before you put it to the project. You want it to be good and hot as it starts to melt. That way it'll help minimize any warping. Okay, so I'm going to let this play and we'll come back for the next step. This up here, look how gorgeous that is. Now, and that's with me not going back and making sure that I pressed all the areas. And if I wanted to, I could use, I have a emboss it like pen that you can, I could really fill in all those areas, and anywhere where it's splotchy that I don't like, I could um, recover with embossing powder and heat up again. But for the purposes of this video, I just want to show you guys what you can do. And obviously, you know, by doing the different tricks I tell you, by making sure to press down on the open areas, you can use, if you have an emboss it pen, you can use that. You can get a really nice solid background. Now on this one, the craft cardstock, I wanted to do, I know some of you may have seen it before, the drag technique, and I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to do it. I was hoping I could just kind of go over just where it's raised with the distress ink and, have it turn out pretty okay. But I noticed right away I was hitting parts of the paper and it wasn't going to make me happy. So I was like, well, what if I did it all on purpose? Like I just decided to drag it all down. And I realized that on this mini cube, my vintage photo, a lot of the felt is like, I think because I use it so much, it's crumbly. I don't even know if that's a real word, but I'm trying to clean that off and um, get it to look on purpose and um, decent for like a background for one of the cards. And so at this point, I was like, you know what? Let me just turn it and go sideways as well. So that's what I start doing. So I went up and down, and then I decided to go sideways as well, and going all the way along the entire card. And you can see all the little like the fragments from the pad itself, but ink still comes off it, and it still works for me for what I need it to do, so I'm not stressing that part. But I wanted to create, to me, this gives it a more distressed, definitely distressed look as far as this particular background. Even though it's very, to me, it's an elegant background, I think it gives it that, it could be very vintage. That's the word. I know I keep saying it, but it, depending on what you add on top of this, it could create a really nice, a nice background for one of your projects. So once I got done with this one, I decided that I was going to do one more in the white, and I wanted to use the Distress Oxides. And on this one, I wanted to try using the ink blending tool. So I grabbed one I haven't used in a while, which you'll see because the foam pad is nice and clean, is the cracked pistachio, which is really a pretty color. I don't know why I don't use it that often. And it's probably one I shouldn't have used on the video only because it's really bright. But we're going to keep going. And what I'm going to do is I'm putting ink all over the entire project, but I'm also going to concentrate making sure that more ink gets on the raised parts of the embossing that we did. All right, so we're going to let the music play while we do this. So once I'm finishing up here, I'm just completing putting down the cracked pistachio, and I'm just trying to layer it on, rub smoothly when I get to the actual raised part of the embossing, trying to make sure that that part is lighter underneath so that the embossing swirls and stuff kind of stand out. Um, that's all I was doing there. But meanwhile, I was also thinking, well, it would be cool to splatter this as well. Now, mind you, it's just regular cardstock, so it's not like it's distressed paper or watercolor paper or anything like that. But you can do the water droplets even on regular paper. You just have to be careful because it's not made for water, so it definitely gives you a different look. And I tried spraying in my hand first and then sprinkling uh from my hand. But I think this point I pretty much am like, okay, let me just spray it real quick. I can spray it and then lay my napkin down and my paper towel and pull up some of the water. And I wind up doing that twice because I wanted a little bit more uh, pulling up of that, distress ink. I'm just going to lay this down. I let it sit because it's good to let the water sit on it for a little bit. It'll draw out more of the ink and create more distinctive patterns. And then, like I said, if you feel like, you don't have enough, then you just do it again. And that's what I did. I'm trying to hold it up here so you can see some of the watermarks. And I'm liking it. And that's why I was like, you know what? I need a little bit more. So if you're unsure, go lightly, see how it does. And then if you like it, go back and do some more. And I'm just using my Distress ink sprayer. And I'll make sure too, in the links down below to have links to the Distress Oxide inks. I know we had a new set of inks come out this year, but I think we even still have some of the first sets on the boutique as well. So I'll make sure to have the links to all of those for you. And see, just a little bit more. And it really didn't, make it go crazy or anything, but it just gave it another added interest. So this is more of the distress. Like I said, if you don't like the way that looks or with the strokes of the ink pad, then you can always try something else, like using the distress ink so it's more smooth. And then you have the Versamark with the embossing powder. And then I thought about maybe one more possible way to use this. And so what I did was, excuse me, I had pre-ran another black sheet through the Cut-A-Bug. And I decided to take that embossing pen I was telling you about and just go along the areas that I wanted with the embossing pen. And once I did few areas, you'll see I'm going to bring out the gold embossing powder. I'm going to sprinkle it on and then I continue going. And I will say this one is probably not the best version to do it with, only because of all the swirls and stuff, unless you like the kind of handwriting look, even though for me I don't like um that it looks messy. I would like that more neat. But if you had something else in the embossing powder, like say you wanted to highlight an embossing folder with flowers, but you only wanted to highlight one here and there, you could do that with the embossing powder. Just put a little bit of the ink using the pen on which flowers you want to highlight, and then heat emboss it. The possibilities really are endless depending on what all embossing powders you guys have. Say there's one, they have the hexagon pattern or the honeycomb. You could use the embossing pen inside the pattern and select certain ones to have embossing powder heated in the middle to give it just added interest. So I like to think of stuff like that, especially when a lot of times we only use our embossing folders here and there. So this gives you more possibilities. Maybe some other times where you can use the same product and you don't feel like you've only got one use out of it. So now we're just going to heat up this little bit we've done right here using the embossing pen. And I just want to say once again, thank you guys for joining me. Um, I know my next video for scrapbooking with me will be on Sunday. I'll be doing another project using the March kit. So have an eye out for that. It's probably going to be a one sheet wonder project. So keep an eye out. And if you haven't subscribed, at the very end, if you just click on my photo and the bell next to it, when you subscribe, you'll get alerts whenever I upload new content. And make sure you guys check out scrapbookingwithme.com. Okay, I have a coupon code that you can use. So if you wanted to purchase any of these, the March kit, I will double check if there's any kits available for the March kit. I will make sure that have the link down for that. And when you go to check out, use the coupon code capital T 15. So that's TT15. And have a ball. They have some great deals, some pre-orders on certain select items, and you really can find a lot of your crafting needs on there. So definitely take a look, you guys. Just hit the link down below, and you guys have a great day.